Record to cloud. So we are recording.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Christopher Harrington. I'm the Director of Public Works and Environmental Services for Fairfax County. For anyone who's not familiar with our department, we're an organization of more than 1,000 people responsible for solid waste, stormwater, wastewater, and capital facility construction and management for the County of Fairfax. And so thank you for being with us here today. This is one of many projects that we are working on. We actually are responsible for managing more than 3,000 miles of sanitary sewers in Fairfax County and over 1,500 miles of streams. Just to kind of put into perspective the magnitude of some of the capital construction that we do on behalf of the county. Just in last year, we completed almost $190 million of constructed projects. And so I want to say that just because I want you to realize that my being here and being involved in this project, I hope you take as a symbol of how important your feedback is. We will do our best. Our goal is to do our best to address as much of the concerns that you have in the design of the project that we are able to. That said, this is a very complex project in the sense that it is both a stream restoration project and a sanitary sewer improvement project. And so there are a lot of complex interdependencies, but we have a very talented team that we pulled together just between myself and Fred Wilkins, Susan Harding, and Heather Ambrose. That's only a portion of the team, but that represents more than 70 years of professional experience working on stream restoration projects and sanitary sewer and wastewater systems. Between us, we have 2 biology degrees, 3 civil engineering degrees, 3 professional engineering licenses, and a host of professional certifications. And so we have brought together a good team to do our best to meet our regulatory and policy drivers as given to us by the Board of Supervisors. And as a responsible steward of the taxpayer dollars for the more than 1 million residents in Fairfax County that we serve, it is critically important to me that the services that Public Works and Environmental Services deliver to the county are done as efficiently and effectively as possible. So we'll do our best to manage our time effectively. We'll have a hard stop at 8:30. This is just the beginning of our process. Thank you for volunteering and being willing to serve to learn more about the project and to share your feedback. And so the fundamental purpose of our first 2 meetings tonight, and we'll dive into that in a little bit more detail, but just to sort of set that stage, the fundamental purpose is start to elicit that feedback so that we can understand the universe of concerns that you have, the things that you like about the way that the creek exists today, the concerns that you have or may have about the project going into that. And then after the first 2 meetings, we'll be able to take that feedback and then look at what is within our ability to start to make changes and then respond to all of your feedback. And we would do that collaboratively in later meetings. And so you probably will leave with questions tonight, and that's okay, because this is to start for us to gather the universe of concerns and interests that you have, that this stakeholder group has, and then starting to understand what is within our capability to address, and then reporting back to you on how we can or potentially cannot address. But again, our goal is to provide a quality project that is as cost effective and delivered as quickly as possible. And so with that, Fred and Susie, I will turn it back to you.
Thank you, Chris. I just want to go ahead and introduce myself again. I know there's a couple of people I haven't seen very often, so I just want to make sure I get my name out there. My name is Fred Wilkins. I'm the project manager for the stream restoration of the Little Pimmit Run at Chesapeake Road. And is everyone seeing my screen? Are they seeing the presentation?
We do.
Yes.
All right, thank you. And this presentation is short compared to all the other presentations. It's based off the agenda that was sent out a couple weeks ago. Now we're going to have some introductions. We're going to go out like what the team structure looks like and the structure of the meetings to come. I'll go over the project objectives. We will touch on value engineering, which is something that's going to be touched on all the meetings that we have. And then we're going to really spend probably the most time on discussion questions just to get the feedback. So just kind of kicking off introductions. I introduce myself. I want to start with the county design team. So would project managers or the county kind of introduce themselves?
I'm Susie Harding. I'm the project manager for the sanitary sewer realignment project.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Heather Ambrose, and I work closely with Fred Wilkins in the Watershed Projects Implementation Branch as the branch chief. So I'm great to meet you guys and start to get to know you better tonight.
All right, then go ahead and touch base with Janesville District Office. Is anyone there to introduce themselves?
Jane Edmondson, Supervisor Faust, Chief of Staff. Good evening.
And I'm Ben Wiles, Staff Aide to Supervisor Faust. I assist him with land use and stormwater issues. Look forward to working with everyone on this.
Thank you, Jane and Ben. All right, then go design consultant wetland studies.
This is Nathan Staley with Wetland Studies, the primary design engineer on the stream restoration side of things.
Thank you, Nathan. Would anyone from the community like to introduce themselves?
Hello, this is Mark Menzies. I have been asked to be the point of contact with the HOA of Chesterbrook Farms, and appreciate this opportunity to hear your presentation and to take questions.
Thank you, Mark.
Hi, this is Jan Lowell, Island.
Yes.
Yes.
So I'll introduce myself simply because I wrote a long report on this earlier, which many of you have read, and I appreciate that very much. And I have a couple civil engineering degrees and live on the stream, both sides. And so therefore, I'm very glad to see this moving in this direction and look forward to participating.
Thank you, Jan.
I'm Barbara Ryan. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
I'm on the board of the McLean Citizens Association, and I chair its Environment, Parks, and Recreation Committee. I also live on not Little Pimmit Run, but Pimmit Run stream, so I'm very familiar with a lot of these issues.
Thank you, Barbara.
My name is Bert Canfield. I live in the Solitaire housing development on Solitaire Lane.
Thank you, Bert.
George Jameson. I live on Maddox Lane, a couple of houses in from Chesterbrook, and I've seen the stream bank disappear over the last 20 years. We've lost about 10 or 15 feet back there. So I'm needless to say, and our land is on the property where the sewer line, right next to where the sewer line broke last year. So we're very interested in seeing this project do well.
Thank you,
I'm
George.
Steve Sidoric. I live at 1621 Maddox Lane, relatively new to this area. About a year and a half I've lived in this home, but I butt up right up to the stream. Again, I'm concerned about what's going to be going on, and especially with the sewer realignment and the proposal. So I appreciate you guys putting this together, and I look forward to hearing everybody's inputs and moving this forward.
Thank you, Mr. Cedric.
And I'm John Feldhaus. I live 1816 Solitaire Lane. I've lived here since 1997, so I've seen the stream degrade. I also have one of the crossings in my backyard, plus another feeder stream right in my backyard. So I'm very interested and grateful that you're making this project go forward.
Thank you, John.
Hi, this is Jim Pettit, and I'm a neighbor of George, 2 houses down. I've actually lived in this property on and off since 1975, since my parents owned the place, and echo George's concerns about the vast erosion, probably more like 20 feet here of the west bank of the Little Pimmit Run. So we're concerned about that, obviously, and appreciate you guys addressing this and including us in your plans. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim.
I'm Alan Ford. I'm president of the Potomac chapter of the Virginia Native Plant Society, and I was invited to join this committee. I've worked with DPWES and on other stream projects, and that's why I'm here.
Thank you, Alan. All right, so I guess if there's no one else, we'll go ahead and continue.
Yep,
Oops,
I'm
sorry.
Allison Graham, and my husband and I have lived at the infamous S curve of the stream since we built our house in 1984. The riprap that the county installed in 1991 was as a result of some very community activist efforts on our part back in those days, and it has held for 30 years. But we have seen an enormous amount of erosion and change in the stream and the stream valley since that time, and we are very happy that the county is finally paying attention after decades of many of us pointing out the issues and noting that the sewer line has been exposed, the 21-inch sanitary has been exposed for many, many years, and is therefore vulnerable, as well as our properties. So we're glad to see something that's finally happening. And I'm on the west side, so part of the group of homeowners that actually met with Faust December 1st to say we're very concerned about what the county's plans are and the effect it will have on our properties. And hence this task force.
Thank you, Allison.
Hey, Fred, this is Seth Lucia. I am a neighbor of Allison's, not too far away, 1819 Briar Ridge Court. And my property will be impacted by both projects. And, similar to some of the other comments we've seen, some of the effects of erosion and on the stream itself. And so we look forward to, moving this process along. We're grateful for the efforts and also have some concerns about, what we've seen to date. And anyway, look forward to working with everyone.
I understand. Thank you, Seth.
And we're, Steve and Drusilla Hufford, we're also part of the group of homeowners on the west side bank. And we are interested and eager to be part of this group. And our primary concern, in addition to the restoration of the stream and its useful functioning, is to make sure that the canopy of mature trees is respected insofar as is possible.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Gino Pagato. My wife Kim and I live at 1808 Solitaire Lane, across what used to be the S curve from Allison. And we're glad to be part of this group and that the county is moving forward, trying to do some mitigation and restoration in the stream. Our primary concerns are just understanding what the concept will look like, what the construction process and the impacts will have on our space in the back, and also what the longevity of the project is projected to be like. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Picotto. All right, I won't cut any off. I don't hear anyone, so I assume we're safe to move on now.
So the by and large, the purpose of our group is to create a dialogue between the community and county staff to make sure that we are designing a project that meets the needs of the community as well as the needs that are set forth by our programs. So there are, larger problems for sanitary sewers and for streams, and we want to be sure that we're talking effectively about all of those issues. Right now, we have 4 meetings planned. The first of those is tonight. Our second meeting is the completed project tour at the Flat Lake Branch Phase 1, and that's scheduled for 2 p.m. on April 30. We've set that to be a Saturday to make it so folks who are working during the work week day can attend and be as involved as possible. We are also planning 2 following virtual meetings, one for the Phase 1 portion of the project and one for the Phase 2 portion of the project. As far as communication goes, just a little bit of housekeeping. If you can raise your hand if you want to say something during meetings, we'll pause and address questions when we can. And outside of meetings, the best way to reach us would be to email both Fred and myself. That way we are, staying coordinated as far as who's responding to what and what questions we've gotten. As far as scheduling goes, we will send out a meeting invite notifying the group participants of meetings at least 2 weeks ahead of time, along with an agenda. And we'd like to ask that participants be familiar with our agenda before the meeting and just kind of reflect on feedback or thoughts that you might have to share during the meeting.
So just kind of starting off with project objectives, it's why is there a project here? And the big one is the condition of the stream. Right now we have a stream that has a lot of energy and it's just eating away at the banks and the bed, as well as threatening infrastructure. So we want to make sure we're trying to get something that is stable, protect the infrastructure, protect private property, and also control like the water velocity. And a lot of this is done through accessing the floodplain. So floodplain reconnectivity is also a pretty big objective to help us control the water.
For the wastewater project, our primary goal is to reduce the incidence of infrastructure failure. There have been 2 emergency projects to date on crossings that are in the project area. And there are 2 other crossings that have been identified as being immediately at risk, with several others showing potential future damage. So we are aiming to prevent the release of wastewater into the stream, and in that way minimizing potential negative environmental impacts and avoiding costly emergency projects.
And before I move on to the next slide, just right now on this current slide, you'll see 2 pictures. It's the same project that was completed by the Northern Virginia Soil and Water Conservation District in Kingstown area. You have the project that's immediately done, which is the top left picture, and then about 5 years after construction is the project on the bottom right. So kind of getting into like what changes can be made. And I'll just start by saying, like, right now, both projects are in the very early design phases. Like stream restoration's got a concept that's 35% complete. And so a lot of the elements of the project, there's room for changes, and kind of highlighted a few bullets for potential changes. There are permanent aspects, and then there's temporary aspects that can be changed. Like looking at permanence, we have a stream alignment that there's room to wiggle it and to avoid trees, as well as the associated grading with that stream alignment. And there's also can do some moving of the sanitary alignment. And then when we start looking at the temporary changes, and what I mean by temporary is these are the elements that are only going to be there for the purposes of construction. So you have the construction haul roads for the contractor to access the site, access points, how's the contractor going to get onto the site, as well as staging areas. Like when they need to build structures or bring in rock for the purposes of stabilization, they will have to put it somewhere, and then they'll haul it where they need to on site. Now, there are several things that we can change with each project, but there are some constraints that we are tied to. And a lot of it is, based on objectives. Like we have to implement a design that is going to, obtain that stable stream. We won't really be able to deviate and give you something that would be potentially unstable. So we need to make sure that we have to aim for stability, as well as project limits, or the project is kind of confined, or the project limits are confined. Now, right now we're going from Franklin Park Road to Chesterbrook Road. That area is known as phase 1. And then north of Chesterbrook Road down to where Kirby Road kind of meets the stream is the section that's known as phase 2. And then another kind of constraint that we do have is the stream design methodology. Like our federal permitting, like the nationwide that we get through the Army Corps of Engineers, it states that we have to do natural channel design, as well as it's consistent with what is in the county's comprehensive plan.
Changes also may not increase the risk of sewer failure. There are some things that the stream restoration project could pursue if the sewer wasn't there. And if we're keeping the sewer there, the stream restoration can't threaten the sewer. Also, the new sewer pipes do need to follow applicable regulations, just limitations as far as maintaining an appropriate slope and appropriate protection from potential, from being near the stream, essentially.
Fred, did you want to take a question or hold them till the end?
If there's a question, we'll go ahead and take it.
Yeah.
Yep. Ms. Graham, would you like to go off mute?
Yeah, Fred, I noticed a couple of the pictures already include a particular location that you want us to look at for the field trip. How much of that project was impacted private land?
That project was all on Park Authority property, but it abuts 2 different neighborhoods. One was it was single family townhomes, and then on the other side you have several townhomes, as well as a pool system, not a pool system, but a neighborhood pool.
So I'd respectfully like to request that we include a field trip that is a project done on primarily private property, which is what phase 1 of this project is going to involve. And where there was both sewer and stream restoration work. I mean, as Chris Harrington pointed out, our project is very complex. And because it's basically involves an urban channel on private property where easements are required, that it's a multiple level project. I think that if we're going to be going to take a look at something, we need to look at really truly apples to apples.
So the Flat Lake phase 1 project does have a sewer component to it.
Okay, great. That's great. But let's also be sure we take a look at a project that definitely was on private property, because that's what certainly, with the 22 easements that you're going to need for this one, so many of them are private, 18 to the 22 are private property. So let's just be fair on that front. We don't have a lot of parkland in phase 1 to deal with here.
Allison, we may be able to provide you some information on a stream project, but I think the purpose of the field trip is to give you a sense of, what kind of impact you would see during the construction and what it would look like afterwards. So the means and methods of the project are going to be the same, whether they're on public land or private land. But we can try to see if we can find a project nearby that you may be able to visit.
Yeah, Ben, it does make a difference because there are homes that are within range of the stream here, which is different when there's a parkland buffer. And
yeah, well, the project that's, I guess, similar, though, I'm not sure how much private land was impacted, although I guess there was, though I don't think there was a sewer project, was Dead Run in McLean Central Park. Right. And there we did have properties that were adjacent to parkland. And I think there were cases where there were impacts to private property. But again, the means and methods are going to be the same, whether it's on private or public land. But that's a project that I think you can probably visit.
And many of us
while you're in
have.
the
Right.
Yeah, so you can visit that while you're in the park, and I'm not sure if you can distinguish whether or not it's public or private, but again, the project is similar in that
Right,
regard.
and Ben, many of us have already visited Dead Run, so we made that part of our kind of.
Yeah, not everyone
identified
on the task force is as familiar with this project as you are, Allison. And so we will certainly provide some information to task force members so that they're aware of that project. And we'll try to track down some additional information for
Thank you, that'd be great.
Thank you.
I have a quick question about the stream design methodology. You said that it needs to be natural channel design, but there's 4 different priorities within NCD. And so are you set on using priority 2 in phase 1?
I think that
sorry.
That's a great question for us to kind of, as part of our elicitation that'll come in the latter part of the meeting. I think if you have clarifying questions as we move through to get to what sort of some of the information, some of the values and perspectives that we're trying to get elicited from y'all so that we can get everything out on the table. That's a perfect question, I think, for that component. So maybe we can, if we could save that one for now. Our time is very limited. And so my interest, the project team interest is really, can we understand some of your perspectives on the positives today, the concerns for tomorrow, what you'd like to see tomorrow? That enables us to go back with our consultants and in an efficient manner, be able to start to understand what we can address and what we can address and then be able to come back. So it's probably a good question for the second part of the meeting.
Thank you.
As far as the changes that we plan to implement, they'll be reviewed for constructability to make sure they can be built, adherence to regulatory and permitting requirements to make sure that we are meeting our regulatory requirements, and for technical adherence to the limitations that we've stated previously. Following the last meeting, we'll be compiling those changes and making revisions to the grading plan.
Are we going to have a chance to review the changes? You say last meeting, but at the beginning, Chris Harrington said there's going to be a series of meetings. I'm confused as to how many meetings are going to be, because on the agenda, it says there's 4, with one of those being a field trip. But it seems like after the changes are made, that's when we need to review the plans.
The answer is yes. Is after that 4th meeting, when we implement and change, the plan will be revised and it will be shared with the community again. You will have a chance to look at it.
And will we have additional follow-up meetings, or are you limiting this to just the 3 meetings plus the field trip?
It depends, right? So I think some of our challenge is that these changes in one area of the project have potentially negative changes in another area of the project. And so, as I said, let's step through this progressively. Let's get all of the interests that you have out on the table. Then we can work with our experts internally to start to understand what kind of, how can we provide you information that you're seeking? If it's just a clarifying question, if there's a fundamental concern that you want us to address, then we want to have that, understand it, and then be able to use that to inform our design as we move through the remainder of the project. So I think it depends on kind of what the diversity of interests that we elicit. It's hard to say. What is important to me, though, again, your time is limited, and how we manage our staff time is limited. We have a lot of projects. And so I want us to do this as effectively as possible. This was sort of our approach. Let's get everything out on the table. Let's get you an answer to these questions that you're seeking, and then let's go from there.
And Susan, I'll just add that, I'm looking at it from my experience and working on the Dead Run project, we'll have as many task force meetings as needed to get through the material. And in addition to the task force meetings, if folks want to meet one-on-one or neighborhood basis with staff, we'll also make sure that that occurs. So that the number of meetings won't be the issue for us. It's just kind of making sure that we're able to get through all of the material and make sure that we address and kind of capture all of the concerns that folks have. So if we need more meetings, we will have more meetings.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Is there a question from the Huffords?
Yeah, there is, Fred, thanks. There's a reference to the adherence to regulatory and permitting requirements. I'd like to be sure I know what those requirements are. Is this a reference to Virginia Department of Environmental Quality permitting under NIPDES, the MS4 plan, and the TMDL, the Chesapeake Bay TMDL? You mentioned federal requirements. I'm puzzled to know what those are.
So yes, it's a whole lot of different requirements, which is why we didn't list them. We are also bound by erosion and sediment control regulations, land disturbance permits, likely the general permit for, well, you mentioned VIPDs. There are also regulations that have certain requirements for the construction of sewers. We may be looking, or we may be getting a certificate to construct from DEQ for the sewers. There's a variety of permitting requirements, and we don't want to take up time here talking about all of those when that's something we typically do sort of on the back end, and we want to focus on getting that feedback tonight.
Yes, I
Generally,
just want to
those are at the
second.
state level.
I'd like to
There's-
just second that, Susie, as well. And I know you guys your hands are going up rapidly, and I think that's great. I think in the interest of time, and I know, and I've seen this presentation, and it's not that long. We've got a few more slides. Let's try to get through the slides, and then we can work on questions, because we really want to get some feedback tonight, if that's okay. So I do see hands are up, and I know Neely and myself are monitoring that. So we will get to those as time allows.
And I'm writing these questions down as best I can.
Me
so
too,
that when we
Nathan.
get to the questions, we
Thank
can
you.
click these
Super.
off as quickly as possible and move on.
Super.
Thank you both. All right, Susie, were you done? Where you go with this slide?
Yes.
Okay, so just touching on value engineering. All right, so a couple things I wanted to point out is kind of to help like frame how we're looking at the value engineering is once any of our horizontal projects goes above $2 million, we have to bring in a separate team to look at it. And it's really an abbreviated review, whereas the design team has spent months gathering the data. The value engineering team only has about 4 or 5 days, and then they will propose several alternatives. And I just wanted to kind of say that these alternatives are like a menu of options where they will suggest something, but it hasn't been fully vetted. And so once we have all the potential alternatives from the VE team, we now go back and work with the wetland studies, the main design engineer, to kind of go through each of the alternatives and figure out which of them we can include on the design. And just by the nature, since the alternatives don't necessarily like consider each other alternative, it's frequently you'll have alternatives that will say one thing which contradicts what alternative B will say. So it's still a process that we're going to have to go through, and we're going to touch on in every meeting that we have as we look at each segment of the stream in detail. So from here, kind of wanted to pivot into discussion questions. There were 5 discussion questions that kind of sent out the initial invite, and looking at the time, we're doing fairly well on time. So we're looking at 10 minutes per question. And if we run out of time on each question, like there's still always going to be an alternative to email both Susie and I, so we can include that feedback. I guess with that, we will go ahead and just jump into the first question of we really want to listen and hear what the community has to say and about the question of like, what do you like about the site in its existing condition?
Fred, can I just take a pause and ask if there were any clarifying questions from the hands that were raised prior to going into the discussion questions?
Yes.
Great.
So it looks like there are still a few hands raised. If these are clarifying questions, it was maybe the Huffords that were first. 3, there was a couple that came up kind of at the same time.
Mr. and Mrs. Hufford?
Sorry, that was an old hand raise, but I'll be glad to answer this question first.
Sure, that'd be great.
What I like about the site and its existing condition is the mature trees and the habitat along the Little Pimmit Run Valley. The diversity of animals that are living in and are dependent upon the tree canopy. Songbirds, kingfishers, raptors, squirrels, bats, tree frogs, fireflies, 17-year cicadas. A lot of things live in the trees, and it's a real pleasure to be a steward for this streamside park-like setting with mature trees and open grassland. So I really like the site. That's why we bought the house.
Mr. Behringer?
Thank you. I think the questions I have relate to Wally Sansone's letter, and I can wait until that's more appropriate.
Just as an FYI, it took me a while too. You do have the ability to lower your hand. I don't know where you do it on Zoom, to be quite honest with you, but I know there is an option. I know where it is on Teams, but not Zoom. Just so we can keep track.
It's in reactions.
Reactions. Okay, thank you. Yep, there we go.
Mr. Lodel?
Well, I had a much different point when I raised my hand, but I will say here that I'd like to second the point about the natural quality of the stream, particularly the tree canopy and so forth, because certainly the sewer project was planning to take down 200 or 300 trees, some of which were a couple 200 years old, in my opinion, for absolutely no good purpose, because I don't think in many of those crossings are a real problem, and it can be fixed lots of other ways. You know that. I wrote a long report about it, so I don't have to add that to your to what you're saying here. But I will say that in general, since I have the floor for a moment, that I really think your process here with all your details and this and that, we're going to go through these details and those details and those details and those details, when in fact the problem really is here that you didn't really do an overall systems, what I would call a systems design and a systems analysis of all this, and look at what could be a way to get the objectives that you want without doing so much damage to the natural environment, without doing so much damage to people's backyards, without costing so much money, and without having to get so many new easements and so forth. I think you're sort of putting the horse before the cart, and I mean the cart before the horse instead of the horse before the cart. So that's my main problem. And this all the points that you all have made today, and the way you put your agenda together and so forth, seems very much to try to nickel and dime the whole thing and look at the little bitty things here, and we're going to show you this problem and that problem and why we have to do this and all of our engineering concerns. And some of us are better engineers than others, but I think that's not going to get us anywhere.
Yep, and I think there is a discussion question about what you don't like about the project. And so I have written down those comments, Mr. Lowell, to make sure that's captured. But Fred, if you'd like to continue on with gathering input on this particular discussion question.
Yep. Mr. Siderick, if you'd like to go.
Yes, and I would second much of what Mr. Lodel said, and also agree with the others about the tree canopy and whatnot. Especially that's a reason why we purchased this home, and I have serious concerns about the trees, any that are removed, to really affect home values in this high-end area. I did have a question about you mentioned the value engineering and the alternatives. That value engineering report was issued in November. When do you expect to have all that vetting done with relation to those alternatives? I mean, it's been 5 months as is. Is that something we can expect soon from the county to see what the alternatives they may accept in their changed proposals going forward? That's something I think this task force should know about, any changes based on such findings.
All right, so the task force actually is one of the things that we're going to be discussing as we keep meeting, is because I know all these different alternatives presented are worthy of discussion with the community. So the task force is going to provide some feedback, and we'll include that feedback as we go, when we go talk about the final thumbs up, thumbs down on which tasks we'll be able to proceed with.
So I guess you didn't answer my question though, how long does it take for you guys to vet the alternatives based on the value engineering report, and when can that be known from the public's standpoint?
So it only takes a few weeks to actually get like the final report, but we're pulling in feedback from the community into consideration. So that's going to kind of start. That time period is really going to start like once we get done with the task force meeting series itself.
So I guess I'm confused. You're vetting the value engineering report and you're taking inputs from this community task force. I see those as two separate things in a way. And if you're vetting the report, I'm still confused as to based on those alternatives that are public now in the report, what are you going to be addressing, changing, not accepting? I think these are all information that we as a community should have.
And I think we're just begging your patience. A lot of different residents are at different, levels of familiarity with our project and the proposal. So some folks have done some fantastic due diligence in reviewing the materials that are available. I'm not sure that everyone has. Our intent today is to start to elicit those concerns. Again, we want to get everything out on the table so that we can start working with our design consultants and our internal experts to be able to start to provide you detailed answers. If we were to try to answer every technical question that you had in this meeting, we wouldn't have enough time. And then that doesn't give us anything to then go back and generate. So as we were saying, the point is to elicit concerns from the first set of meetings, to develop a response to those concerns so that you can understand our perspectives and some of the exact questions that you're asking about regulatory or policy drivers. Then we can have a conversation about sort of your concerns of either how we have, or have not addressed those concerns. For us to engage our design consultants to go through an iterative process costs you money, right? It costs taxpayers money, and that is limited. And so we're trying to do this as effectively and efficiently as possible. So this is the first step in the process to share feedback on some things that are good and some things that are not good about the creek in its current condition, and things that you're concerned with or would like to see in the design, so that we can start to inform how we engage with our experts and our consultants.
Okay, so you've been sitting on the value engineering report for the past 5 months. Thank you.
It looks like, let's see, Mrs. Frank?
Yes, I think that this question actually shows one of the biggest problems with the project, that what you are referring to as the site is for us our yards, our private property. We purchased our home because we like the site. And so I really think that a lot of the stream restoration articles that I've seen talking about reconnecting to the floodplain and creating wetlands by helping to control the flow by allowing it to spread out is just inappropriate for private property. So I think that, that part of the problem is where we really don't want to talk about the likes and dislikes and our values. We want to talk about the science and the law, the science involved in this, and the fact that this is private property. And so the approach needs to be different.
Is there anything that you like about, I'm using the word site, even though I recognize that maybe that was a poor choice of the word in the existing condition that you would want to provide for us?
Yes, the site is my backyard, which I like. And when I walk out on my porch, I have complete privacy with decades-old landscape elements, including irreplaceable trees and shrubs. And that would change with this project. It would no longer be the same property at all. And I think that would seriously erode my property values as well.
All right, we got that question. I have that written down. Mr. McGrazi.
Yes, hello, good evening, everyone. We just recently bought property on the Hardwood Lane. We overlook the creek, and we love this place. We love those trees. I can only second everything, all the concerns that have been said. we plan to stay here for several years while kids, graduate from high school and then leave. But value of property will be maybe halved probably if there'll be trees cut in front of us that someone said that they already marked. In addition to the big question is that what is the staging ground or staging area for the equipment that some said that will be in front of our property, which is between the creek and our backyard. And that's also a big concern for our family on Hardwood Lane and some other families here, because we don't want to wake up and go to bed at the sounds of dust and the machines and all the work, all the value. The reason we bought this property is this quiet area, hidden and tucked away from all this the life around us. So it's really a big concern for us and our family, and I can only share the concerns been voiced before. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so that is about 10 minutes just for the first question. Like, you'll still be able to provide opportunity to provide feedback. I did want to move on to the second question, or the next question, really.
Before you continue, let me mention one thing. There is a very recent scientific paper published doing a study across the country showing the channel design methodology increases the property value. And it would be very good. We have it in the office, we can share it.
All right, thank you, Assad. All right, so looking at this next question is what do you not like about the existing condition?
Mr. Feldhaus?
Yes, well, I live on the stream, and what I dislike about the existing condition is the fact that the banks are eroded, so they're vertical. The stream is undermining trees in my backyard. In fact, I had a large black walnut tree fall from the neighbor's yard across the stream into my yard, crushing my child's trampoline. And I see a whole stand of trees on the other side that are being undermined and that are inevitably going to fall across the stream if nothing is done. In addition, I have a sewer crossing in my backyard, crossing number 5, and I've watched over the last several years that crossing become exposed, and it's now completely undermined so that the main flow of the stream is underneath the crossing, and it's going to continue to be undermined in that way. And so I'm anxious to see that resolved. So those are the things I don't like. I do appreciate and I like all the trees, and I like everything that's natural in the backyard, but I just would like to see this stream return to the condition somewhat similar to the way it was when I moved here in 1997. But I'm hoping that's going to be the result of this project.
Thank you, Mr. Feldhaus. Mr. Pettit? Oh, you're on mute. Sorry.
Okay, sorry. I was just echoing what John said, the verticality of the stream bank, the erosion I mentioned earlier when about 20 feet since I've lived here, and the undermining of the trees. I think it's just going to widen and worsen if nothing is done. But I totally appreciate everybody's concern about the trees. I mean, I really love the trees. It's the main reason I live here. But doing nothing is not going to help, I don't think. And just like I said, the main concern is the erosion behind my house. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pettit.
Mr. and Mrs. Hufford?
Thanks very much, Susie. I have two things I don't like about the existing condition. One really derives from VDOT, I think. VDOT has some exposed landscape fabric and some dislodged Class 1 riprap right along Franklin Park Road at the bridge, just downstream of the Franklin Park Road bridge. But the more systemic thing I don't like about the existing condition is I see that there's seemingly very little control of the inputs of stormwater inputs to Little Pimmit Run throughout the watershed. And that's true in Fairfax County, And I think it's probably true in Arlington, perhaps to a lesser extent. So to me, the existing condition includes the systemic issue of inputs to the stream.
Thank you, Mr. Hufford. Mr. Rainey?
Sorry about that. I was on mute. Thank you, Susie and Fred. I think one of the things that I really don't like about the existing condition is the prevalence of invasives. There are stretches of the stream where they really just completely dominate the landscape and seem to smother any other kind of growth. And even in, I appreciate as well people's concerns about trees, but I think there are a lot of parts of the stream where the trees are really, the roots are exposed. They seem to be barely alive, and those areas seem to be especially attractive to the invasives. So I love trees. I'd like to preserve as many as possible, but I just don't see how this project can go forward unless we're willing to give up at least some of them. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rainey. Mr. Sitter?
I would add that there's quite a few down trees already in the stream, quite large ones, and they've been there for extended period of time, months upon months. And of course, if you get a major storm or whatnot, that debris is going to go downstream, and that's what hits these pipes that are exposed. And to be quite honest, I mean, if you're wanting to, even if we just replace the pipes going forward, should trees fall into the stream in the future, I mean, it's going to cause some sort of damage over time. So I really think the county needs to do a better job removing the debris, especially large debris, which is already in the stream, and not let it sit there waiting for the next storm to take it downstream.
Thank you for your feedback. See, we still have a few more minutes. Mr. Jamison?
Yeah, I want to echo what Jim Pettit and several other people mentioned. The problem, as I know a couple of you know because we've talked, problem we have parkland in back of us, so our private property is not technically on the stream. We have a parkland buffer. And the home we bought with the property we bought 30 years ago, which was lined with trees, those trees are virtually all gone. They have been swept away. The land is eroded. I think whether it's 10 feet, 15, 20 feet or more, we've lost in back of us that much land. Probably, if I had to say anything nice, it is that the protection of the sewer pipe that created a dam in back of us has created a lovely reservoir, and ducks come, and that's wonderful, but that's it. Everything else is gone. And when we look across the stream, we see erosion, we see rocks, we see kind of a dump. So we'd like to get back to let nature and have the parkland, the Park Service, and the stream restoration pretty it up, replantings, shore up the land, and we're not particularly bothered by what's been done. And I will, when we talk about the plan, talk about the crossings, because that's benefited us in the one way I mentioned, in addition to stopping the loss of raw sewage. But it's all the beauty that people are talking about, the canopies, we got none of that. It's gone.
Thank you, Mr. Jamison. All right, so going to get into the third question. And if anyone, just want to remind everyone that if you had a chance to speak, I continue to encourage you to email both Susie and I so we get the input included in the feedback.
Mr. Rainey and Mr. Siderick, I think you still have your hands up, but if you'd like to answer, what do you like about the proposed plan?
All right, my apologies about that. I left it up. To answer that question, I would say, just the overall effort to try to solve the problems with the stream, because obviously it's only going to get worse. Weather is getting worse. Storms are getting worse. Yes, you have 30-year-old pipes crossing the stream. So trying to address the major erosion, attempting to slow the pace of water downstream. And then, in my opinion, just replacing pipes with newer pipes, better material to last another 30, 40, 50 years, whatever it may be. That would be the ideal approach. And as Chris mentioned, being responsible stewards for the taxpayer dollars. I mean, this would probably go in the next question, but accomplishing your goals, doing what's best for the community, but not blowing the budget. And some of the proposals, especially with the sewer realignment, would really blow the budget for no reason.
Thank you, Mr. Siderick. Mr. and Mrs. Hufford?
Yeah, Steve Hufford here again. What I like about the proposed plan is the goals of Chesapeake Bay protection and compliance with the VIPD's permit. I think those are good things. And also, it's good that Fred and Susie are so responsive to concerns we've raised. That's the good side. The bad side is I've lost track of what the proposed plan actually is, because you've said so many things are possible. So I don't really know what the proposed plan actually is, since it's incomplete at this stage, and I've been told of many possible changes. So it seems to me that there really needs to be some strict version control once there are actual revisions made to a definitive plan. So, thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Hufford. Mr. Feldhaus?
Yeah, well, I like the plan where you're intending to slope the sides of the stream so we can get some vegetation there to slow down the erosion. I do like the idea of putting some natural structures in to hopefully slow down the speed of flow. I like the idea of getting rid of the crossing in my backyard, although frankly, I don't understand the value engineering report proposal that the crossings can all remain. And so I'm hoping you're going to address that proposal so we can get a better understanding of whether it's possible to just cover up those crossings and keep them in place, or whether they actually have to be moved, because it struck, I was told at one point that you just can't put riprap. When the crossing into my backyard first started to get exposed, I called the county. This was like many years ago, 2018. And I said, you guys got to do something here, because this is going to get undermined. And I was told you can't really do anything. You can't put riprap in. You can't do anything to protect it and stop it from being undermined. And sure enough, it got undermined. So I just don't understand the value engineering report that says you don't have to do anything, just cover up the crossings. So I'm hoping that you can address that.
Thank you, Mr. Feldhaus. Mr. Lodel?
I just wanted to address this question about the pipes, since I put some effort into that, and some of you know about it. You can't really just replace the pipes with the same kind of pipes or just leave them in place. If you want to replace them and keep the levels of the sanitary sewer the same, which you need to if you're going to use the main line that's there, you can put in much stronger pipes. Now, some of them you can do what happened up at what's called, I think, Crossing 3, where they built a weir and they put the pipe, existing pipe, more or less completely protected, and put a little pond behind it. So that's an option. There are options here that can make sure that you can keep pipes across the stream and avoid having to tear up everybody's backyard on the other side. And they'll withstand pretty much whatever you do. How you rearrange the stream itself, of course, is then more or less independent, but it needs to be integrated with that. And I'll just mention that I think that that's kind of the problem we have here in these kind of discussions, because if the county could come up with some schemes which really do try to keep the stream from continuing to erode, but without tearing up all the trees and so forth, that ought to be the goal. The goal shouldn't be just, well, let's make sure we can stop the erosion, and then we'll see how many trees we tear down, and maybe it's this way or that way. You need to put that in the goal in the first place and see, how do we design something which preserves the natural beauty of it and preserves all the trees. And I think leaving the pipes helps that, because it means you don't tear up a lot of land on the other side. But it's not the only thing that could be done. And so in general, I just would urge you to, I think asking us to respond to a little bit of this and a little bit of that when the big picture is not figured out. And we all agree on the big picture. We want to save as many trees as possible. We want to keep the thing looking well, and we got to get rid of the water somehow or another. It just doesn't seem that that's been the goal of the project so far.
And I just want to applaud and second everything that Dr. Lodell just said. That's one of the challenges of this kind of Zoom meeting, is you can't know how many people are nodding and agreeing with each speaker, but every single point he made is absolutely on target as far as Richard and I are concerned.
Thank you, Mr. Little, and thank you, Ms. Graham. Ms. Frank?
Yes, I like the fact that you did put into the channel plan a cross vein where the sewer crossing 5 is, that could protect that sewer crossing, because I really do think that they can be protected in place in phase 1 at least. And I understand that there was a similar cross vein put in for crossing 4, and we saw some pictures of it. It seems to be pretty good looking, and if that's a solution that will work, or part of a solution that will work, I think that that the homeowners would be a lot happier than seeing a whole second access road go down the opposite side of the creek, and having staging areas on one side and lay down areas on the other. So I think that, combining the 2 projects into a single project is also something that is a logical move.
Thank you, Ms. Frank.
I appreciate the acknowledgement of the location of those cross veins. I don't want to derail things too much in getting through these initial questions, but my hope is that we can help address all of these issues and questions, and through talking through the plans, because the goals that, as Mr. Lodell or Dr. Lodell outlined, those were the goals and have been the goals in the way that the plan has been crafted to this point, but acknowledging the fact that it is not a final plan. We are working toward a final plan, and we're trying to kind of strike that balance of how far can we go with the design without the easements being kind of worked out. So, but yes, each of the crossings, when you look at the stream plan as designed at 35%, it was taking into account doing whatever we could within reason, looking at flooding and other issues, to try to protect those crossings as much as possible, knowing that there are certain limitations in how much we can raise the stream because of those flooding and other constraints.
Thank you, Nathan. Mr. Rainey, it looks like you've got your hand up. Oh, it looks like you're muted again.
Thanks, Susie. Sorry, I keep doing that. No, I just want to say I appreciate a lot of the concerns that have been raised, but I think one of the things I appreciated about the proposed plan, at least I guess the iteration I thought was being put out, was eliminating the crossings and burying the sewer lines so there would be no more crossings. That seems to be a really more permanent solution. And somebody made a comment, I think, about, well, let's reinforce those, they'll last 30 years. I mean, I plan on being in my home for more than 30 years. I don't want to see a failure in 30 years. And I think if we're going to make an investment and the county's going to make an investment, we should make it so this is a permanent fit, excuse me, a permanent fix that we're not worried about in 30 years. And, I I know that impacts a lot of people's yards, but I think this is probably something we're only going to get one shot to do, and we should do it, you know, for
That so-called permanent
forever.
fix takes down pretty much every tree in my backyard behind me, and
I
really gets
understand.
rid of the trees. The
Okay.
canopy
Mr.
cover.
Siddick, I
So-
appreciate your
Yeah,
concerns,
can you wait?
but if you could
Come
let
on now.
Mr. Rainey speak, I'd appreciate it.
No, and I
It's
understand.
gonna impact everybody differently, especially.
Let me
mine,
put,
to be
excuse
honest.
me, I don't mean to interrupt, but let me put a finer point on what Susie, I think, was trying to suggest. We want to be able to respect everyone's comments, suggestions, concerns. And so besides not talking over another, please respect anyone's position, whether they agree with you or not. That's going to be the most productive way that we can move forward. Thank you.
Thanks. I appreciate that. And I understand not in my backyard. But I think with these projects, I appreciate it has a bigger impact on some people than others, but it's for a greater good. So, thank you. That's all.
Thank you, Mr. Rainey.
Susie, I'm cutting there real quick. We're about the 10-minute mark, so we can take
Thank you.
one more. Then we got to move on to the next question.
I'm still on here if it's feasible.
Go ahead.
Am I on?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I just wanted to clarify here this thing about replacing the pipes, just to respond to Mr. Rainey and some of the others. The thing that certainly that I proposed in the thing I wrote was not just replacing the pipes with the same old kind of pipes you have now. First of all, some of them can in fact be, as the value engineering report said, can be in fact reinforced and probably don't need to be replaced at all, and they will last a very long time at pretty low cost. Right now, and 30 years from now, you wouldn't really have to do a whole lot there either. But there's a whole new generation of pipe technology. We've talked about it. I talked to the engineers about it, so forth. You can put these pipes in there, particularly the one that's broken could be put in concrete piers on each side, and it's probably going to last 1,000 years. It's not going to ever go away. So there's ways to replace the pipes that are not just going to be a 30-year fix.
Jan, did you want to address the question of what do you like about this proposed plan?
Me?
Yes.
Well, I'm not sure there is really a proposed plan at this stage, so I hate to fuss about the fact that it's not enough of a design to really respond to. For example, in part of the stream that I live in, I talked to Fred about some, and we walked and we've done some things, and I was glad to hear that where the bedrock is already exposed, that would be left alone. But the other parts of it, I'm not sure. The last briefing we had, there were a couple of discussions about, I forget the name of the approach, where you have two levels on the sides and a wider stream and two levels. And some places there's some of the designs show curves that would really take out all the trees on both sides. And maybe there's other ways to slow the flow. I'm not sure. There's hydrological calculations that I haven't seen there that would determine how much you're going to really slow things down or not slow things down. There's also comparisons. For example, some of the Donaldson Run and Gulf Branch in Arlington that I've traipsed on a lot have used some very clever approaches with natural looking riprap that doesn't look like artificial riprap to restore both of those streams. I haven't seen anything done about that. So that's the reason I can't really say what I like about this proposal, because what I don't like is it doesn't really seem to have started from with the constraint that says, okay, we're going to try to design this in such a way that doesn't cut down any more trees than we have to, that doesn't destroy it any more than we have to. And let's put that as at the top of the list, not just sort of, okay, let's design it the way we would like to engineer a new stream if we didn't have any houses and didn't have any people living there or anything. And then we'll make some modifications for the people that are there. I think it's upside down. So
okay, Jan, I appreciate that.
Thank you, Mr. Doolittle. You've actually answered our next question. So why don't we go ahead and move on into that?
If I can offer that, my hope is that in working through these meetings, we will help explain how exactly what was said about considering all these these different facets and features and constraints, including the trees and the sanitary crop. Hopefully we can articulate that we have made those considerations, but I know we have to work through kind of a lot of the information so that we can explain those things.
Thank you, Nathan. It looks like the first person I have is Mr. Feldhaus.
Sorry, I left my hand up. I didn't have a comment on this particular topic. I'll take the hand down.
That's all right. Thank you. Mr. Jameson.
Yeah, thank you. I've got a few points. Let me start off by saying I don't know that I like the plan. I don't know that I don't like the plan. And the reason is I find it confusing. And so this is not necessarily a problem with the plan as the way the report is written. So let me expand upon that. It's not clear exactly why we need to remove so many crossings. That's stated as a major goal or objective. I think a goal. And so related to that, it would be good to know, and maybe it was timing and when it was done, the expectation, given the work that was done in back of us at 1639 to create that concrete barrier and the pond. Either we got good quality work or we didn't. If we got good quality work, it'd be nice to know at some point, and we don't have to say it now, how long that would last. I guess somewhere between 30 years and 1,000, according to the discussion. It'd be nice to know which end it's closer to. And if it's closer to the higher end, why not keep more of those and do that as opposed to the proposal? A second point is it's not clear, and I know this is the sort of thing that kind of depends, and we did walk around the properties, but given that we have parkland in back of our place, not clear to me what sort of measures will be taken after, assuming the land is dug up, what sort of, and the stream is shored up, not really clear what will come in its place, what kind of trees, what kind of plantings. And it would be good as we proceed over the next several weeks to talk about and get a little bit more information about that. It strikes me that the plan, and again, partly because it's a lot of pages that made my head hurt, it comes across to me as a one size fits all. So the options, and yet what I've heard in the session tonight, we have different needs. Some landowners have their property, I guess, right on the stream. Others of us don't. And so that can lead to differing views about what might be done. And yet it's kind of a one size fits all approach. And I'm wondering a little bit more about whether at one part of the creek, one approach could be taken, at another part of the creek, another approach could be taken. Now, maybe it's in there, I don't really know, which gets to my final point. I think it would be nice to have a chart to eliminate some of the confusion so that on one page, you'd have columns and rows with each alternative and option going across the top, and then the variables coming down the side with the pros and cons identified. So if it's, it'll be obvious what the variables are, X number of crossings versus Y number of crossings, or easements needed. But then something below each column to indicate, here are the basic pros and cons, to make it easier for guys like me who are not versed in all of this and don't have a heck of a lot of time to spend on it, to quickly be able to think about, okay, those are the core differences, and that's where I want to focus my attention. I'll stop right there.
Thank you, Mr. Jameson. Mr. and Mrs. Hufford.
Thank you. So I really want to, first of all, thank everyone for all the effort that's gone into it so far. In particular, I feel strongly, it resonates with me that so many people are saying they don't fully understand the plan. Having read the plan, the VE report, and been involved in a variety of meetings with Fred and Susie at different times. I think the first thing I don't like about the proposed plan is that I really don't have a grasp of what it is. And I think at this point in the process, it would be great if I could have that. So that's the first thing I would like, is additional clarity so that I can comment meaningfully on what it is the county is thinking of doing. To the extent that I do understand it, the proposed plan is wasteful. Even if the value engineering report requires additional work, and I'm confident that it does and that you're going to do that. It seems to me that it points out a couple of options that could save millions in taxpayer money, and why a preferred approach would be almost a clear-cutting approach when the natural channel design option offers different levels of tree destruction. It seems to me very surprising, since cutting trees is a driver of costs across these various projects, that it wouldn't end up being considered more carefully. And I think the thing that that really did most stick out to me on what I've said is in our last commenter, the ones approach, the idea that we have to implement the type of natural channel design which is going to require the clear cutting, essentially, 400 plus trees perhaps, including a lot of the smaller canopy, without a consideration for what we've seen on our own property, that when VDOT makes a change and tries to create new vegetation, a lot of that simply does not succeed. So to me, the idea from an environmental point of view, an aesthetic point of view, from the air quality benefits, the water quality benefits provided by the living trees, the idea of just clear cutting the stream valley seemingly really, it needs to be thought of more deeply before we undertake the costs and the damage associated with that.
Thank you, Mrs. Hufford. Ms. Frank, I think you're next.
Yes, I like that there's acknowledgement that the urban watershed issues are contributing to the increased problems, but I'm baffled as to why that's not being addressed in the plans. Just focusing on this limited area isn't going to solve the problem. And I think that I don't fully understand why you're not going from the Arlington County line to Franklin Park Road, and why you're not including the tributary that comes through Franklin Park that really carries a substantial amount of water. Both of those sections were in the watershed plan that the county put in place in about 2008 or 2009 or so. Doing the buffer restoration should occur before the stream restoration occurs. And so I don't fully understand why that's not being done. In addition, I think that it would be very helpful to identify within the watershed what else is being done. Even if it's not part of this plan, we would at least like to know what is being done to try and control the flow.
Thank you, Mrs. Frank. Mr. Ford.
Thank you. I just want to reiterate and reinforce what Mrs. Frank just said. The challenge that we have is any engineering is going to have to deal with the fact that there is increased development in this entire watershed. And if that isn't also modeled into the plan, then whatever estimates and calculations you've made based on the current flow will be overtaken and overtopped by the increased flow in the next 10, 20, 30 years as infill development continues in our community.
Certainly. Thank you, Mr. Ford.
I think we are at about the 10-minute mark for that particular question. We got one more question to go. I think it's probably good to move on to that question so that we get the full amount of time for that particular question. And the fifth question is to the community is what do you think we can do to minimize your concerns on the project? So,
Mr. Behringer.
Yes, I had to unmute. I share concern expressed earlier about not going back to the county line. It seems to me there are inputs into the stream volume that come not only from the stream that comes down from Jamestown School, but the one that comes down from Franklin Park. And of course, the main tributary, which is carrying a huge and augmented volume from Arlington County as a result of their project, increasing the flow out of Arlington under Old Dominion. And it concerns me that there's no participation here by Arlington County, and that these inputs, which are within Fairfax County, are effectively just taken as a given. They're not part of the project. I have one very minor detail, but I would like some more information on what exactly is the sewer easement that Mr. Sansone has referred to. I can't identify it on the drawings that you've supplied, and maybe that's something I could take up with one of you separately by email, but
certainly, Mr.
perhaps
Barrington,
you could identify what the 25-foot sewer easement is that he's referring to.
if you could just send me an email, it'll be in one of the later slides, and I can clarify on that. I'm not completely certain what you're asking, but I can answer that.
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly what I'm asking for either, since I can't identify it. Thanks.
Certainly. Would you like to answer the current question, which is, what do you think we can do to minimize your concerns?
Yes, I think it's implicit. We need involvement from Arlington County, and I would like to see something that addresses how this project takes into account what it can do to change the inputs, to change the volume inputs, rather than just accepting them as a given for stream purposes, since we know there are larger volumes now than there were just a few years ago.
Thank you, Mr. Barrington. Ms. Frank?
Yes, I think one of the things that I see missing from the plans are a budget for maintenance. And, you know, my concern is that after the 3 or 4 year period of time that you're required to monitor the stream restoration, if a big storm comes along in year 6, there's no guarantee that anyone's going to come in and fix anything. And, you know, I've got a culvert along the side of my property that I have asked Fairfax to fix a dozen times, and nobody ever come to do any maintenance. And so I understand there's a different budget for maintenance, but we need some sort of guarantee that somebody will come in and clean up the mess after a big storm and replant trees if need be, or if the deer come and eat all the trees, even that there'll be, you know, some maintenance done. I think that's a huge concern with this project.
Thank you, Ms. Frank. Mr. and Mrs. Hufford?
Yeah, thanks, Susie. I think there are a number of things that you can do to minimize my concerns. Implementing one of the first 3 recommendations in the value engineering report would help a lot from my perspective. Sewer line crossing 6 is on our property, and it really is not in such bad condition from what I can see. So one of the first 3 VER recommendations would leave that in place and save the county significant money, from $1 to $3 million. Secondly, take the time to iteratively refine a full plan that meets the concerns raised by this task force. Someone during the call kind of asked the question about our process of 4 meetings in total, 1 field trip, you know, 1 meeting on phase 1, 1 and 2, and when will the plan be revised and can we see it? So taking the time to iteratively refine a full plan will really help. Thirdly, make the majority of priority 2 natural channel design stream restoration changes within parkland, not along homeowners' properties. And I think we touched on that earlier. Coordinating across Fairfax County government to better limit the impermeable surface area and reduce stormwater inputs to Little Pimmit Run and other surface waters would really help. There's been a mention that we need to coordinate with Arlington. I've learned recently VDOT is a big player here and they're not on the task force. So VDOT obviously has two big crossings of roads in this project area. They're the ones who did the work along our property back in 2011. And it's my understanding that VDOT actually kind of runs the bulk of the roads in Fairfax County. So if there's going to be green roads or any sort of road control of stormwater inputs, VDOT is a player. Finally, I would hope that you could explore with the Virginia Department of Environmental Quality all the ways to get credit for reducing stormwater flows, because stream restoration is only one of it. It's a large driver in terms of total suspended solids and phosphorus, I think it was. But if you can find all the ways and renew the MS4 permit to reflect that and not try to get every credit through stream restoration, that would be great. I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hufford.
Thank you, Mr. Hufford. Mr. Jameson?
Yeah, I have to say, I'm not quite sure what the Flat Lake Branch tour is going to be, but it seems to me that given, and maybe this is just me, given that I'm so confused or uncertain about what the papers tell us is likely to happen, I think instead of a tour, I would be more interested if we're going to tour anything, I think it would be useful for those of us who haven't done it to tour where everybody is and to eyeball the various crossings and to eyeball the property that affects us, not something that's been completed somewhere else. But related to that, whether or not we take a tour, I think having a session instead of a tour to really explore a little bit further what the plan says. We don't have to use that session to talk about solutions, which I assume would come up in further discussions on the phase 1 and 2 discussions. But that first session, I think, would really be valuable for people like me who don't quite know. I mean, I have trouble reading the maps. It's small print, and it really would be nice to have a walkthrough that chart by chart or chapter by chapter, we could say, well, what does that mean? When you say that, let's have a discussion. Let's keep away from debating with one another at this point, who's got a good idea, who's got a bad idea. But it seems to me to have an explanatory session that gives us an opportunity to learn a little bit more about the properties we're talking about, as opposed to a property somewhere else that's already been dealt with, I think would be very valuable.
All right.
Thank you, Mr. Jameson.
I should add, I say that in part because Susie and Fred were terrific in coming and looking at the property along in the back of Maddox and talked to several of us. And we found that very helpful. And others are talking about their properties, and I don't know what it looks like. I don't know how to take any of that into account. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jameson.
Thank you. All right, so we are at 8:30 right now, which is our scheduled stop time for the meeting. If anyone wants to continue to submit information, please send it directly to Susie and myself.
Could you go to the
Actually,
next slide,
Fred,
Fred?
I have a very important process question. I would like for the people who are on this task force to be able to contact each other. And I don't think you've given us a way to do that right now. We don't have a list of the task force members and their emails, for example. So I'd like to request that you go ahead and send that out. Also,
Allison, the best thing to do for that, I mean, most folks ask to participate, but we're not asking folks to create a task force outside of our task force. If you want to share your email address, if anyone who is interested in communicating with you, they can do it that way. But that would be my suggestion.
There are, so Mr. Little mentioned that he's written, in a report and on his opinions and whatnot. And I know I've submitted a letter to you all and also to the county commissioner. I think that's fair game to be sharing that type of information with the task force.
That's not a problem. Yeah, we can post Mr. Little's report. If you want us to post your letter, we can try to figure out a way to do that as well.
The other question that I wanted to raise is a process one. And I think this is really important because I'm not sure how you take a session like this, where there have been some people rather vocal and others who have not been. And this isn't even a representative group of all of the homeowners and property owners who live along the stream. How do you go with that information and create a appropriate and representative response?
I'll take that one. First, I want to say thank you to everyone who's participated. You've shared your stories, your concerns. I really appreciate it. It's informative to me. And specific to that question, again, we want to collect all of the feedback that we've received to date, the feedback that we're receiving specifically from you who've identified as being interested. As you correctly mentioned, there's 62 property owners, parcels, I think, within the project reach, and not everyone is here as part of this conversation. And so the feedback that we've received tonight, we will transcribe. The feedback that you email individually, we'll keep anonymously as well. My goal is to commit, I am committing to responding back to that feedback. So I'm envisioning something like a spreadsheet. There were some good suggestions that were provided today that identifies each of these comments, and then we can provide a response to you. You can review that in advance of an upcoming meeting once we've had time to prepare that document, and then we can start talking through some of the specifics. The challenge that you just correctly identified is why we're taking a little bit of a more broad and open approach to this at this beginning phase. There are competing perspectives. We're hearing from some folks. We're not necessarily hearing from all. And we want to make sure anyone who has or has interested does have the opportunity to share their feedback, because we want to be as inclusive as possible.
Mr. Harrington, I'd be glad
Sure.
to work with you on that. I have 40 years of consulting experience doing exactly this kind of thing.
Awesome.
And I think that it would be very important to be sure we have a measured, balanced, rational, and fair approach to evaluating, to gathering, soliciting fully the feedback, and then, being able to weigh it in a project like this.
And I think that's why I'm saying we'll be transparent by responding back to this feedback in writing, so you can see it, you can review it on your own time. If you have individual questions, you can communicate with our project managers, and then we can have a discussion as a group as we continue to move forward. But thank you for the offer.
And Allison, I don't think everyone has the chat open. So if you want to say your email address so folks can jot
Right.
that down.
So
if they're interested.
my email address is Allison, spelled Alison, so 1L, .Graham, Graham, like graham cracker, at Mindspring, MINDSPRING.com. I'm happy to compile a complete list of all the task force members who are willing to share their email addresses with each other, so that we can also have an opportunity to really inform each other. Along with Mr. Rainey's idea, I think it's really valuable, Mr. Jameson's, to be able to meet in each other's backyards, to see it, even if it's not a formal task force event, and understand what the impacts of this project will be on each of us. It's very different for everyone.
Yeah, and I don't want to speak for for staff, but I do think that looking at the Pimmit run is a good idea. And so I don't mean to put Chris on the spot, but that's something that we'll try to see if we can incorporate. I do think that it's worthwhile to look at a completed project, but also review kind of what's going on in your backyards.
And I also want to say thank you that I put together a very extensive list of questions, not on topics that I think have certainly affected the phase one homeowners on the west side. There wasn't an opportunity to even read that or share it with everyone, but I'd like to be sure it gets to everyone on the task force who's interested in seeing it, not just the members of the county, because it's a very exhaustive list of issues that we'd like to understand better. And I think it's worth a task force meeting just in and of itself to go through those.
Thanks, Allison.
Thank you. Again, anyone who had additional information that you'd like to share, you can see our contact information there on the page, and we'll be back in touch. I appreciate your time and participation, and I know you didn't get all of your questions answered, but we will work diligently to provide answers to the information requests and the questions and the comments that have been raised today. And it's only the beginning of the process. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good evening, everyone.